the legendary John Warner. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to really try to get your bio here. It's expansive, but John is one of the fathers of green chemistry. He wrote the book on the 12 principles of green chemistry 15 years ago.
Oh, 25 years ago.
25 years ago. That's known as to be like the staple on green chemistry. John is also affiliated with both Monash University, the University of Bath. He's a distinguished fellow at Zymergen. He started a company called Warner Babcock. He's got 280 patents. And he generally is one of the nicest guys I know, and the chemistry teacher I wish I had, because I probably would have done better than my C+ average back in the day. So hi, John. Thank you so much for joining us. What did I miss? What did I miss there? Oh, and there's rumor that you've met 45 presidents/kings. Is that true?
Oh, I don't know about that, but I've been very, very lucky and blessed to have a lot of fun traveling and meeting people. That's for sure. Yeah.
Great. And John is also co-hosting on with SoulBuffalo and the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network, the Green Chemistry Alliance. And we've done like 10 sessions probably in the last 3 or 4 months. We've had 20 heads of R&D from top consumer packaged goods brands, really across the spectrum. So that's been a lot of fun. So I've spent a lot of time with John. And yeah, excited to dig in there with you today. So you want to talk, before we get started, you want to talk a little bit about Beyond Benign?
Beyond Benign. Beyond Benign. It's a tongue twister, isn't it? Beyond Benign.
Benign. Got it.
Yeah. Okay. And Beyond Benign, www.beyondbenign.org, is a nonprofit organization that's working to develop curriculum for K through 12 in universities to integrate sustainability into the STEM curriculum. And so I'm very, very proud of it. Dr. Amy Cannon is the executive director of that, and they've been in business for nearly 15 years now, and just doing amazing things. So if anyone is looking, if there's any teachers or educators that are looking for ways to bring curriculum into the classroom, this organization has tirelessly put over 200 lesson plans online for free. They're not even in PDF, they're in Word format, so the educator can make it more their own and help them do that. And so it's just an amazing group that's been doing amazing things, and urge anyone that's looking for help in education and curriculum, especially now where a lot of us are doing homeschooling, there's some interesting opportunities there too. Thank you for bringing that up, Dave. That's super important to me. Thank you.
No problem, John. And maybe could you talk a little bit about some of your inventions, some of the sort of groundbreaking things that you've done with respect to ocean plastics, the plastics issue at large? Love to just kind of ground into that as we start.
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, I've been focused on, the whole point of green chemistry, just, in a very quick nutshell, is that if you look at the education of chemistry, if you look at the courses that an undergraduate or a graduate student takes worldwide, and you look at the lessons and the classes they have to do to get their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, or their PhD, you'll be shocked to find out that no university, none, require a chemist to have any knowledge on how to predict whether something is going to have negative impact on humans or the environment. This whole body of knowledge called toxicology, environmental health, the people who make things don't learn how to do that. In the field of green chemistry, saying, well, maybe we can solve a lot of problems in the world if we teach chemists how to do that. And so the body of knowledge is called green chemistry. And what I've been trying to show is that using green chemistry is a creative advantage to actually get faster time to market, more cost-effective products, whether in pharmaceuticals. We've spun out a company that's got an ALS drug in clinical trials, whether it's in hair color technology, whether it's photovoltaics, whether it's packaging or plastics or even asphalt. There's so many ways that we can make products and things that the world needs that have less impact on human health and the environment. And of course, when Climate Week like now, we're just reminded over and over again just how important this is to come up with technologies that don't do that.
Got it. Got it. Speaking of Climate Week, this is funny because we decided to jump on and do this. We were in a session the other day and we were talking about Elon Musk and who is or can there be an Elon Musk of plastics or with respect to the plastic waste issue and like what he's done with respect to the climate issue. We'd love your feedback on that because we need an Elon Musk over here, I think.
We do. And the thing that is magical about the brilliance of Elon Musk, and to juxtapose that on plastics. Now, remember the first question. Can we do in plastics? All right, so put that aside. When Elon Musk said, I'm going to make a Tesla car, did he say to himself, well, I want it to look exactly like the cars that are already out there. I want it to do exactly what the cars already do out there. And I don't want it to cost any different. And my success is to be completely invisible but electric. Of course he didn't. He made a better car. He made a car that was amazing in its performance, in its look, and redefined what a car was. If we're going to change the world of plastics and packaging, we need to redefine what that means. And if our goal is to just do exactly what we have been doing for the last 60 years, just now with something that's better for the environment, that's not an Elon Musk kind of thing to do. That's a kind of a pedestrian thing that everyone should be doing. It's important to do. But if we're really going to change the world, we need to reimagine the whole system and look at packaging and plastics from a much bigger position, in my opinion.
It's interesting when we think about the paradox, but it's called the plastic paradox. My friend Nina Butler from More Recycling, she talked about this in front of Congress a few weeks ago. And, it's this idea that we have this super material on our hands that allows for planes to fly more efficiently, for cars to be safer, for food safety. There's absolutely not a better material out there. You have, with respect to climate, you have industry that, certainly has math to prove it up, that shipping lightweight plastic is going to have a lesser carbon footprint than shipping other materials like glass, for example, or things that are more heavy. And then you look at environmental or activist groups that are just go right to the beginning of the source, that most of these materials are come from fossil fuel feedstocks and from natural gas, and then when they get into the ecosystem at the end of the day, that there is methane and different other greenhouse gases that emit because of this. So, it's this really tricky area, and our organization being in the center of the environmental groups and the activist groups, it's a really interesting narrative. We're still getting some chats that have come in, around whether this is true or not already. So I think that in itself, we have a hot topic on our hands. We love your feedback, on that.
Yeah. So again, absolutely. There are things that the world has benefited from human technology, and almost everything we humans do, obviously we did it hopefully for some benefit, whether it's medicines, whether it's ag agents, whether it's textiles or packaging or plastics. And again, the thing is that we're never smart enough to get everything right, and there is always a negative consequence. And obviously the issues that have come with that, and we can tick off all the positives and all the benefits, but we also, it's not very hard to see all the negatives as well. And so the trick here is how do we reinvent these things so that we don't lose the lightweight, that we don't lose the important things that plastics have given us to keep, food safe, to keep people protected from, the weather, to, do all the important things that our society has become dependent on, but do it in a way that doesn't, or at least reduces the negative impact. And that's where, as we've said many, many times, we need to look to nature. We need to be inspired by nature. And we need to understand how would nature do these things in a way that is more ecologically sound.
Can you give us examples? I know your pond analogy is one that I always think about, but like when you talk about nature and biomimicry, or how we would even begin to think about this, what do you think about?
Well, it's really interesting, and again, I'm a pragmatist, so what I'm describing here, we can't snap our fingers and do tomorrow. All right, this is something that's going to be in the long run. But think about how nature, how biology handles materials. Okay, when we eat our breakfast or our lunch or our dinner or whatever, what happens? The food goes into our GI tract in our digestive system, and we break big molecules into small molecules. We take carbohydrates, we make them into sugars. We take proteins and make them into amino acids. Lipids, we make them into fatty acids. But what's interesting about nature is that at the exact same time we break down the small molecules, we're growing hair. We're growing skin, we're growing blood cells, we're building energy to do things. Nature does at exactly the same time the destruction and the construction of molecules, so that disassembly and assembly happen simultaneously. What do we do as humans? If we humans invented the way that we metabolize food, what would we do? We would break down the proteins, we'd make them into amino acids, we'd purify the amino acids, we'd put them in a little truck, and we'd store alanine in one finger, and we'd store glycine in another finger, and maybe we'd take and break down carbohydrates to glucose, and we'd store, galactose here and glucose here, and we would end up, maybe putting adipose in our fatty tissues, which I do plenty of there. But what we would do is we would separate the deconstruction and the construction, and that is fundamentally unnatural. And so when we look at how we manufacture things, we have manufactured things separating the concept of putting together and taking it apart, which essentially creates a linear process. When we can put together the deconstruction and the construction, now all of a sudden, people have heard of the circular economy. Right now, the circular economy is a really good vision, but we do not have the technology to truly achieve it yet. We need to invent the technologies, and when we can deconstruct and construct materials more efficiently and mitigate that impact on human health and the environment, then we can start achieving things. But it's going to take a real long time.
And you talk about entropy, and like when you're recycling a bottle, for example, right? Like how eventually when a bottle gets recycled 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, the molecules start to break down, right? And you can't get as high a pattern. Now, is that when you're saying the circular economy is not, the materials haven't been invented yet? Are you talking about entropy and about like how you just can't keep stuff happening yet?
So essentially, when we think of sustainability, when we think of protecting the world, in the ecosystems, what we want to do, obviously, if we make a car bumper stays into use for a very long time. Decades, hopefully. When we make a playground park, we want that to be so the best thing we can do when we're making materials is to keep it in use. Or if we make a cup of something that we can reuse over and over again. My cup here, I can reuse this cup over and over and over again. But what happens is this thing called entropy rears its ugly head, and inevitably stuff breaks. And we can't keep reusing it. So then what we do is what we call mechanical recycling. And when we do mechanical recycling, we hold the molecular structure the same, but we break up the form. We chip it, we put it into new granules, and then we rebuild it again, and we remake it. And the problem is with doing that is, kind of in nature, a hermit crab. When a hermit crab leaves its shell, it exits one shell, it goes into another shell. That shell stays in service and it's being reused. All right. And so in nature, if we can reuse things, that's pretty cool. In nature, in human built world, that's kind of when we try to do the traditional plastics recycling, mechanical recycling. But the problem is, as you pointed out, every time you recycle something, whether it's paper or plastic, inevitably we do chemistry. and we start breaking the materials, and now all of a sudden they don't work anymore, so we have to go to the next level, and that's what I call the materials metabolism. And that we haven't, nature does that wonderfully. We humans haven't done that efficiently. And so that's the undiscovered country here. And so can we do that with biomaterials, materials that are more renewable? How do we reimagine materials that way?
And what are some of the materials that you are excited about right now? I mean, there's a lot of them. Some I think, the everyday consumer would know, like Pepsi just put out with Diageo, a wood-based bottle that came out. There's certainly like seaweed, seashell related material. Tell us some of the stuff that gets you excited.
There's so many really cool things, coming up with new ways to use proteins, the new ways to use, there are biopolymers. Polylactic acid has been around for a very long time. Polyhydroxyalkanoates are a little bit newer and have opportunities. Being inspired by nature and coming with things that biology can make, that's where it's at, and we're just now scratching at the surface. That if we can use, again, we live in an economic world in which people aren't willing to pay premiums for technologies. If cost wasn't an issue, we could make a lot of material for commerce. Unfortunately, either it's consumers or retailers or somewhere in the supply chain, there isn't the capacity, and I really, really wish there was, to absorb some cost for the invention of new materials. So that is one of the biggest barriers is, if you have to invent something that does what other packaging already does at the same price, how does one finance that? How does one, get the investment to do it? That's the challenge, but there's so many opportunities. There's, anyone who's into chemistry, anyone's into material science, there are so many untapped avenues. It's an old field in that Thomas Edison in the early 1900s dreamed of having an entire plant-based economy, but we still, even 120 years later, haven't figured out the chemistry. And I think it's because of this concept of materials metabolism.
And you didn't tell everybody, but you're sitting in Thomas Edison's lab.
Yeah, yeah, that's my background here. Is in Orange, New Jersey. I think it's a National Historic Site that you can go and visit Thomas Edison's lab. Yeah.
I should have said earlier too, John. We met John. We SoulBuffalo and the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network. We ran the Ocean Plastic Leadership Summit in the middle of the Atlantic Gyre last May. That's where we initially met John. We had 65 industry leaders. We had 6 CEOs. We had NGO leaders. We had activists and industry folks sharing rooms. It was a pretty incredible experience. And we hit a ton of plastic, and it really kind of blew everybody away. And certainly built a tremendous amount of trust. We put John on stage, and everybody was leaning in and wanting more when he was done. But, it's interesting. You look at all these different types of companies that are highly competitive around the value chain. We're talking to so many of them in the last few months, John, and this inventor's dilemma just comes up again and again, where heads of part packaging, they want to make new stuff. They want to be at the cutting edge, but they can't compete against the cost of virgin plastic, which is at all-time lows for a lot of different reasons. But, certainly got hit an all-time low right in the middle of COVID. You have natural gas reserves here in the U.S. that are fueling the entire world, and this cheap plastic, it's just hard to beat, and then it's hard to build infrastructure that scales to make new materials. So you have maybe we could talk a little bit about PHA, which sounds super, to just anybody listening, can sound sort of like, another chemical, but it's interesting. Tell me if I'm wrong. It's microbes that are basically put together in these giant beer vats, and it makes a plastic alternative that actually does break down in the environment.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting that polyhydroxyalkanoates, that's PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoates, exist in biology. They are in cells. They are in you. They're in plants. This is a type of molecule that is natural. And so the trick is, again, how to come up with a way of manufacturing it and making products. It is a building block. Not every solution is going to come from PHAs, but a whole bunch of them are, and that is one of the undiscovered countries that we need to do pragmatically and practical, and find ways to invent things that people are willing to pay for. That again, from my definition of green chemistry, is a technology that works better than an incumbent technology, costs better than an incumbent technology, and oh, by the way, helps human health and the environment. I wish that were different. My personal story here. I wish that society was willing to pay more, but they don't. And so I think it's happening. I think the consumers are getting more aware, and the pressure from consumers is getting better and better. But we need to, as scientists, if we invent a technology that is dependent on regulations or some set of subsidies, changing an election, all that can come down like a house of cards. And so it's incumbent on the chemists and the material scientists and the engineers to go in the lab and invent stuff that works better, costs better, and people would want it on those attributes alone. And oh, by the way, it's also a heck of a lot better for human health and the environment. And as we started, because scientists aren't trained how to do this, we don't have an army of people doing it, because it's a skill they're not taught when they go to school.
And you go back to Elon Musk, who's not a chemist, but obviously there's chemistry in everything. And what he, on a sort of metaphorical level, what he built meets the criteria of what the sort of overarching green chemistry idea is, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. It's an engineered device that has less impact on human health and the environment. It performs really, really well. And oh, by the way, it's better for the world.
Yeah, and it's the cost. There's a cost advantage depending, even though they're super slick and not cheap to buy. But
yeah.
Why is it just because packaging is not sexy? Is that the biggest difference?
Yeah, I think if I were to ask you, okay, is the brain more important than the heart? Is the heart more important than the lungs? We have this conversation. Most people forget the skin is an organ. And no one ever thinks about the skin as being important. But man, if we didn't have our skin, we'd be a puddle of goo on the ground, right? It wouldn't work. We need our skin. And packaging is like the skin of commerce. And it protects product from the outside world. It protects the outside world from the stuff inside. It visually signals people's, intent. There's so much in packaging that is overlooked. And it's amazing that we look at it as the throwaway, costless part of a product. And all we look at is what's inside the package. When the package itself, when we start valuing the package itself, when people, and one of the dreams is, can you imagine if you wanted to buy the product and you wanted the package too, because the package did something cool as well. If you had a box in your kitchen and you could put that in a box and it produced a filament for a 3D printer. And so that then you could have a 3D printer, and when you're done with whatever, if you made a Yoda head or something like that, you toss the Yoda head in the box and you get a new filament out. And if that true circularity, we have not invented things to be able to do that yet. We're getting there, but that's what I mean by the materials metabolism. And if that box also charged some batteries in the process and you got some energy out of it too, wouldn't that be cool?
It would be totally cool. It's interesting. I live a couple hours north of New York City, and we have to take all of our waste to the recycling center, and it's a bit of a hodgepodge. I'm sure a lot of people have to go through this, right? I mean, there's 17 different dumpsters that you have to throw things in, and you take your batteries to a certain place, and I mean, there's not really an intuitive way to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But it's like what kind of system can we design that makes this super important for consumers and top of mind for consumers, and it's like we're talking like macro like consumer awareness as well. Yeah. Yeah. And in some societies the studies are that people want big gaudy packages because it's like a status symbol sort of situation, which gets especially tricky when you're talking about however many different cultures there are in the world, thousands.
But I believe in the basic goodness of humanity, and if they understand the story, if they understand the impact, if we do a good job, letting people understand the the consequences of some of these decisions, I just believe most people will endeavor to do the right thing. It's just we're confused about what that right thing is, and that's why education, whether it's K through 12 or university, is so important, and that's why companies have to start forming that focus. And that's why I'm at Zymergen now, is because there's a whole company that's just completely built on the premise that superior performance, superior cost is what is necessary for the commerce to be successful. But we shouldn't have to compromise. We should be able to have that superior performance and superior cost and have things that are better for human health and the environment.
It's interesting. We had Footprint as a part of our consortium, the Green Chemistry Alliance, the other day, and they have an interesting product that's replacing meat trays, replacing plastic meat trays and more of a paper sort of, but it's gotten a tremendous amount of traction and so many different, can you speak a little bit to some of those, maybe just what they're doing, but also some of the other exciting companies that you've seen out there before we get out of here?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many cool things going on out there in which you look at all the different organizations that have come up with biodegradable packaging, whether they're reusable containers, again, PHAs. There are companies out there that already have some products on the market. Danima and is one, for example, that's out there on the forefront. There's so many different things with like imaging and people coming up with inks and dyes and colorants, or in the construction world coming up with ways to use plant-based materials. Collaborative Aggregates, of all things, is a company that has an asphalt paving technology that allows you to reuse asphalt pavement, that you dig up one day, use it the next day, instead of buying new virgin material, using a plant-based system. There's the list just goes on and on and on. There is, in the United States, is a Presidential Green Chemistry Challenge Award given by the federal government. If you go to the EPA and do Green Chemistry Challenge, US EPA, you will get over 100 technologies that have been described and have received awards over the years through various presidents over the years. Presidential Green Chemistry Challenge Award, and in previous administrations, this has been a big deal in Washington. Yeah.
Well, I think there is a lot of hope, that's for sure. And John, can't tell you just how grateful we are to know you and for you to be a part of what we're doing over here. And I think when we zoom out and we look at this time in history, it has been a pretty wild year for pretty much everyone. Different levels of wildness for sure. But we're going to look back at this time and look back at what we've learned from COVID and look back in general about what it's going to be a marker in time, and so glad to be on this journey with you, John. You got any closing words you want to say before we get out of here?
No, thank you for everything that you're doing, what Ocean Buffalo is doing, what the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network is doing. This is why I have optimism, is because people like you doing the amazing things, helping make all this stuff come together, and thank you for everything, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk with you today.
Thanks so much. Remember to check out Beyond Benign.org.
Yes.
To learn more about John's nonprofit. And anyway, we'll have a really great day. We're super grateful, and we will talk to you soon, John.
All right, thank you. Be well.
And we will be back on Thursday with Aaron Simon at the WWF for the third episode of the SoulBuffalo Earth Report. Thanks so much.